Hi, welcome. It's Thursday, November 5th, 2 days after the election here in the United States. We still do not have a clear winner of the presidential election. And we're going to talk about what has transpired with polling and predictions. We're also going to talk about what has happened here in California. There are several propositions that were on the ballot here. One in particular that is of interest to us in the people analytics community and those interested in people data and AI in general. And that was Proposition 24, which is the California Data Privacy Regulation and Enforcement Act. So we're going to talk about what that means for organizations as well as individuals moving forward. And finally, today we're going to talk about what I believe is something that's critically important to get to a place of connectedness and togetherness so we can move forward as a country here in the United States. And that just being basic empathy and actually how to make that happen when there's such polarization here in the United States and elsewhere in the world, because like many of us we're really concerned. So my guest today is going to be Lawrence Coburn, who is actually trying to address these challenges from the perspective of digital realities that we're in right now. How do we empathize and stay connected and meet new people and take in other points of view when we're doing remote work, when we're not in the midst of these people shoulder to shoulder. So it's a unique challenge, but it's a initiative that needs to take place. And hopefully, it's my bias that he is successful in his pursuits, not only around creating greater connectedness with regards to different political stances and social stances, but in the workplace. So we can empathize with one another, empathize with the people who are doing the work if you're a leader or manager. And similarly, if you're a leader or manager, understanding some of the challenges and constraints that you have that might not be able to provide the resources to the workforce that you would like. So with that staging, let's talk about the polls here in the United States. It has been talked about by pundits. There's been a lot of literature written about it. This is a short interview on NPR, National Public Radio here in the US, that I encourage you to listen to. I think it'll give you a good feel for what has transpired. But I want to not only comment on the content of this brief exchange, but in polling in general. And let me set the stage. Going back to 2016, the polls were poor. In other words, they did not accurately predict the outcome of the presidential election. And at the time, there were four things that were highlighted as being the likely reasons that was the case. Those reasons were, in summary, people just didn't tell the truth when they were actually interviewed. People actually weren't accessible, meaning they couldn't find the people who were actually going to vote. The polling didn't capture the level of enthusiasm that was out there. In other words, when you're doing polling or predictions, you have a certain population that you are suggesting is out there. They underestimated the population that was actually going to go and actually vote. And finally, when we are doing predictions, are we gathering the right data? Are we asking the right questions? And this is where I really want to focus as we analyze what just happened, because the idea that polling and the resulting predictions was going to improve was all over the news. 538 was writing about it, and 538, as you likely know, their methodology effectively does meta-analysis insofar as they grab polls and they index these polls and they weight these various polls. So they have a kind of a meta poll, if you will, that weights these differently. So the ideal outcome is that you have elevated confidence in what they are actually predicting. And so, or projecting. So here is the essence of what I believe did not happen, because the polls, I want to say, were wrong, because there's always a level of error that's built in, and we have to acknowledge that. What we have to really acknowledge is that the level of error is much, much higher than we believed. And it's also, in my view, predicated on this fact. And it goes back to one of the earlier points regarding 2016, is the population that actually went out and voted is not representative of the sample size of the people that were actually asked the questions and actually provided the answers and provided those answers truthfully. Thus, the data that was put out actually had way more error than the analysts thought. So, how to offset this? Number one, I don't know. Unfortunately, if people are going to not tell the truth, there's nothing anybody can do about that. Apart from some extraordinary measures. What I would contend, however, and this is obviously not as possible as we can create here in the COVID reality, is that getting people in the room and actually asking them when they're in the room, and what does that look like? Imagine if we were going to do a campaign rally on a certain theme, what were the number of registrants for that theme? If you get the contact information of those registrants, how about asking those people the polling questions that are going to ascertain whether or not they're going to vote, number one, and number two, who they're going to vote for. Obviously, if it's along a line of a certain theme, whether it be Black Lives Matter, Blue Lives Matter, it's going to indicate with a high level of probability who that individual is going to vote for. So I'm curious to what extent such approaches were employed. My sense, because I haven't found any that have employed such an approach, there was very little done. Now, keep in mind who owns that data. It's the people who are actually putting those events on. But if I'm a pollster, and even if I'm part of one of those parties, I actually want to do that type of outreach. I want to put on events. I want to draw people to a location, whether it be a digital location or in-person location, then actually ask them, because they have already provided evidence that they're an active voter, an engaged voter, so the probability is very high that they will go vote. However, if we're just doing random calls throughout the country based on whether or not they're registered, it's who knows their level of engagement, who knows how their voting history is. They're having actually walked neighborhoods in my past. There's shocking amount of information that's there about the voting history and what someone has actually participated in from a voting perspective. So at the end of this, and this is where I want to leave it, I'm going to write an article around not only polling, but when we think about polling, it screams to me surveying employees within the context of what we're doing within organizations. And if I am an executive, I'm saying, well, if the polls are wrong, is the polling that I am doing, is the surveying that I'm doing within my organization similarly wrong? In short, no. You can have a high degree of confidence about the insights that's being generated based on the employee responses of surveys in your organization. It is really apples and oranges, and there's statistical reasons for that, and there's also behavioral reasons for that. Number one, increasingly there's a heightened level of confidence that the data that they're supplying, the employees are supplying, are going to provide benefit back to them. And the survey providers that I am aware of are committed to making that happen and providing leading practices towards that end. So there's an organizational benefit, there's a team benefit, there's a group benefit, and of course there's an organizational benefit or individual benefit as well. So that being said, can we improve? Absolutely. Are there going to be things that polling is going to be questioned on moving forward? absolutely well-deserved criticism. So we have to apply a heightened level of creativity because obviously polls influence behavior. They influence passive behavior or they elevate engagement. So we need to continue to strive to make them more accurate. The learnings of 2016, coupled with the learnings of 2020, hopefully we'll get to a better place moving forward. The consequences are extraordinarily high. And hopefully, with greater insight, we're going to be able to vote smarter and achieve a more humane, better, inclusive society. So with that, we're going to take a short break and we'll be back and we're going to talk about Proposition 24.